So far, the 2024 season has been quite a roller coaster of emotions. Now, like me and probably like quite a few of you out there, we probably thought this season would be another Max Verstappen dominated season. And yeah, we were sort of right so far. However, my God, have we had some decent races so far. Now, Verstappen has won most of the races. No one's actually qualified on pole on an actual race. Norris got pole on the sprints. However, there are a few rays of sunshine beaming through, giving us a little bit of hope that this season could be good. Now, this season we have had 3 different race winners with 3 different teams. Now, the last time this happened in a season was in 2022. However, the last time this happened in the first 6 races was back in 2018. Now, that season was another Lewis Hamilton dominated season. However, we did have a good little battle going on for a little bit where Vettel looked like he could put up a fight. Even Daniel Ricciardo was getting in the mix early on. However, I know it is dangerous to draw comparisons to each season, as 2018 and 2024 have been very, very different. They've only got that one similarity really helping them out. However, we can't deny that this season so far could be getting us ready for some amazing racing up and down the grid for the rest of the season. And that is what I'm going to talk about as to why Imola could be such a turning point for the F1 season. Now, what we need to realise is it's all about one thing. Upgrades, people. Upgrades. Everyone and their mums are bringing upgrades to Imola. Even a few small upgrades most teams are bringing. And a lot of teams are bringing some major upgrades. Because this could potentially be a full reset for the season on where the cars look for the next few races before the next few upgrades start coming in after the Imola upgrades. However, let's go through one team at a time and talk about what could happen. So we've got to start off with McLaren, and that's because we start off with them in Miami. Of course, Lando Norris, first race win. What an amazing weekend for McLaren. Now, we do have to take it with a pinch of salt because, yes, the safety car did affect the result. Lando Norris probably would not have won that race. And when I say probably, 100% would have not. And we also, when looking at the McLaren pace, need to take into effect that Verstappen did have an issue at turn 14, damaging the floor of his car, which would have affected his Red Bull slightly. However, all of these things aside, Lando Norris did win and he pulled away from Max Verstappen in a Red Bull after the safety car, showing that McLaren had the pace from these upgrades. McLaren's upgrades literally were basically a full new car. They even said basically they started on the back foot. Going into Miami, these were the big upgrades that they were going to bring to the car, and it worked. It worked amazingly. Oscar Piastri only had half the car updates and he still looked fantastic as well. But especially race pace wise, on those mediums, McLaren looked like the fastest car. And for anyone to say that they look faster on a tyre compound to Red Bull is just incredible. I mean, last season we had updates and upgrades coming to people's cars, but no one ever looked faster than the Red Bulls apart from Singapore. So to see these upgrades for McLaren look like they were the fastest on the medium tyres and potentially had the best pace on the hards as well. Their soft pace tyre run wasn't very good, as we saw in qualifying where they kind of bottled it. However, it's very good signs for McLaren, and yes, they aren't actually bringing upgrades to Imola. Technically, they're just finishing Piastri's upgrades, like I said. It's the sort of thing where it's safety, where we know these upgrades work. We know they're pushing for Red Bull, Ferrari. So will they be able to hang on? For me, I don't think they'll be able to hang on. However, I do think that the McLaren itself should be contending for podiums now these days after those upgrades. And I'd be very disappointed if they weren't going into Imola, especially as Imola should be a decent track for McLaren. Now, I do have to say one last thing on McLaren, which is, of course, I mentioned Verstappen getting a bit of floor damage. I really do think Christian Horner over-exaggerated how much damage Verstappen got in his car because they said it severely affected his pace. However, when you look at Perez, what damage did he have? And he was even further behind the Ferraris, let alone the McLarens, in the Miami Grand Prix. Yes, Perez, we know, is slower than Verstappen. However, if Perez was slower than the Ferraris and the McLarens, it wouldn't be unrealistic for Verstappen to be very close to Lando Norris's pace, even with his car fully fixed. But then we move on to Ferrari. Again, they're bringing major upgrades to their car for Imola. It should be pretty good from them. I think the main thing they are bringing are changes to the side pod philosophy. Basically, they went for an underbite before. They're changing it to an overbite on the car. I'll show some pictures of before and afters of what it should look like. And basically, with these upgrades, it should improve the airflow to the floor of the car and to the rear of the car, basically improving the aerodynamics of the full package of that Ferrari. This isn't the only thing they're bringing. They're improving on their engine cover by making larger openings, again, to help with cooling of the engine. Again, should help the car. And there should be tweaks all around the car on the floor and the rear wing itself, the chassis as well. There's quite a few upgrades coming to Ferrari. And the main thing is, like I said with those side pod changes, is they're moving to the Red Bull philosophy. Now, can they have Red Bull's results? Possibly, possibly not. However, it is a good move for Ferrari from the sounds of these upgrades. And I really do think if McLaren's upgrades push them to Red Bull, Ferrari's upgrades should do the same. Now, will they work? Of course, we don't know. I'm not a time traveler, so I don't know if it will work in Imola. However, only time will tell. But I'm very excited for Ferrari, and it's exciting time to be a Ferrari fan for all of you Ferrari fans out there, because their car does look good. Now, I do say that their car will look better anyway, just because they'll be back to their old livery. Sadly, they've got the HP logo still on it. Because that livery in Miami was possibly the most disgusting thing I've ever seen. And a lot of people said it looked like toothpaste. You know what, I have to agree. Thank God they're going back. They really did tease us with a blue livery and then just to give us those hints of blue. Very annoyed with Ferrari about that. However, their upgrades hopefully will work for them. But it's all good talking about these upgrades for McLaren, for Ferrari, and there are more upgrades I will talk about after this team in particular. However, we need to talk about the big team itself, which is Red Bull, because they're not just going to lay down and just let every team pass them. No, they are also bringing upgrades themselves. Now, the upgrades they're bringing, they've been a bit secretive about them. It's supposedly going to be a new floor design for the Red Bull because they haven't actually made any upgrades for this part of the car yet. However, only time will tell what they actually bring. All we know is there's a lot of upgrades coming, and Verstappen and Adrian Newey both seem very excited about it. As Verstappen even stated, besides, we're bringing an upgrade to Imola, which I expect a lot from. So, yes, we don't know much about the upgrades they're bringing, but it's Red Bull. If Red Bull are bringing an upgrade, normally that means it's going to work. I expect to see Red Bull still be in the top car going into Imola. However, could it be closer? I'm really hoping so. And by the looks of things, it should be. So it's looking very exciting. But then we move on to another team bringing major upgrades. I think probably the team bringing the biggest upgrades from the sounds of things, which is Aston Martin. Because of how they've worded it, Mike Crack and Alonso have both been stating that these upgrades are essential to the 2024 package. Basically saying it's going to be like the McLaren upgrades for Miami. It should look like a full new car, the Aston Martin. There should be things played around with on the car that are noticeable going into Imola. It'll probably be the floor, the chassis, the rear wing, probably both wings to be fair, side pods, the whole lot from what they've been talking about. But again, like Red Bull, they've been quite secretive about what the upgrades will be, so we'll only be able to see when we get to Imola. However, again, another team bringing upgrades which could shake up the grid. We haven't actually seen Aston Martin have an upgrade where they've boosted themselves crazy since the start of 2023. Obviously, that season they started off amazingly. So it'd be nice to see some Aston Martin upgrades, and hopefully they do work. However, I think if they can just get back in to fighting potentially McLarens and the Ferraris, beating the Mercedes, I think they'd be happy with that. And then we move on to the final big team bringing upgrades, which is Mercedes. They brought half their upgrades in Miami. They're going to bring the rest of them in Imola. And I think this is just the saddest package, to be fair. I'm sad to say for any Mercedes fans out there, it just doesn't look good. Their upgrades in Miami, they said, did technically work. Didn't see any improvements realistically on the track. Hamilton had a decent race. But I just think there's so much work to be done on that Mercedes. And realistically, I can't see these upgrades working. I genuinely think Aston Martin will probably overtake them quite comfortably now with those upgrades. Mercedes have got to be cautious that they don't drop any further. If Mercedes come to Imola and they have the pace of the Ferraris, McLarens and the Red Bulls, I would be so shocked. I'm being serious when I say this. If one of the Mercedes even gets into the top 5 for the Imola Grand Prix, I will pour a full ice bucket over my head with freezing water, because it's just not happening. These Mercedes upgrades sadly aren't good enough. The rest of these upgrades aren't going to do any better, and with other teams bringing upgrades, I just expect them to drop even further down. So yeah, if they do well, I'll drop an ice bucket on me over my head. However, I'm pretty sure I should be safe, considering it is Mercedes. But then in summary for these big teams, this is why this season could change quite drastically after Imola, because there's two main outcomes after Imola. First off, we have A, which is Red Bull upgrades work, Red Bull carry on with their dominance, Ferrari and McLaren fighting for those podiums, with Aston Martin and Mercedes sort of in the balance. And then we have option B, where McLaren upgrades have worked, they're still fighting Red Bull because Red Bull's upgrades haven't really worked amazing, and potentially someone else's upgrades, Ferrari I'm thinking mainly, but potentially Aston Martin, potentially a Mercedes, surprise all of us and get back into that fight against Red Bull, and they could be going for race wins. So it's such an exciting time to be an F1 fan, especially for the big teams. Most likely it's going to be option A, but we can be delusional right now and hope that the upgrades everyone else brings work. But it's not done there, because it's not just the big 5 teams bringing upgrades into Imola. It's also the lower teams. Haas are bringing major upgrades. Williams are bringing upgrades, which will alter the way the bottom 5 teams work around. Sauber should be bringing some more stuff to help with their pit stops. Alpine should be tweaking some of the upgrades they brought to Miami to make them even better for Imola. And VCarb, even though they've had not much news about them for Imola, I would be surprised if they didn't bring anything as well. So the whole lineup of the grid could be shifted quite drastically in Imola. And that's why I'm so excited for this race. And that's why I think this could be the great reset for the F1 season in 2024. Because we've also got to think, Red Bull have even said they're going to plateau with their upgrades. So how much could these Red Bull upgrades improve their car? Who knows? Again, Ferrari seem to feel pretty good about their car as well. McLaren seem to feel pretty good as well. It's just an exciting time to be watching F1. But anyway, what do you peeps think down below in the comment section? What do you think about all of the upgrades? Whose upgrades will work? Do you think we'll see a surprise from Haas, from Williams, potentially getting into the points? Do you think someone like Aston Martin or Mercedes could start fighting for podiums again? Or will Red Bull just carry on with what they've been doing the last few years and run away with the title for the rest of the season? But anyway, thank you all so much for watching. I hope you are all as excited for the Imola Grand Prix as I am. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you all later for another F1 video. Bye bye, and have a good week.